Today, we are honored to present a touching and heartbreaking story. This story is based on real events with the author's consent. To make it more accessible to the audience, the original memoir has been restructured into a shorter and more approachable version. To protect the privacy of the characters, names and locations have been changed. The story is titled Biological Mother's Marriage. Now let us listen to the story. One quiet afternoon in the city of Wanju, Kangwon Province, a middle-aged man sat in deep thought by the river. His name was Minj, and his face bore deep wrinkles and signs of pain. With trembling hands, he clutched a white handkerchief, the only remaining item from his tragic wedding. That wedding had marked the beginning of a tragic chapter in his life. On that day, the bride, the one Minj had sworn to spend his life with, was none other than his biological mother. The river before him flowed violently, as if it wanted to wash away his fleeting moments of happiness. Minj wondered, why had life led him into such a whirlwind of pain? Why had fate been so cruel to make him face this truth? He sighed, and a tear fell, merging with the rushing water. Memories from his childhood to adulthood flooded his mind. The river flowed relentlessly, but in Minj's heart, memories from over 30 years ago rose like violent waves. The deep wounds in his heart were stirred, bringing all those memories to life. A woman, his mother, appeared in his mind. She was the most beautiful woman in the village, always with tears in her eyes. When Minj was young, his mother, Sujin, was known as the mountain girl in the village. At 18, she married Juno, a strong and capable young man. Their wedding was filled with joyful sounds of flutes and drums. Everyone in the village came to celebrate, believing that their marriage would bring long-lasting happiness. However, that joy lasted only a year. When Minj was just a month old, an unexpected accident shattered the happiness of the family. Juno died while attempting to climb a cliff in the forest to build a house and fell into a deep ravine. This was an accident familiar to the villagers, but Juno's death still came as a shock. No one was prepared for his departure. Sujin, Juno's wife, cried in pain over her husband's death. But her sorrow did not end there. Village tradition required her to hold a grand funeral for her husband, according to custom. Cows, pigs, and valuable animals had to be sacrificed and offered to the gods, while visitors had to be treated to a feast. But Sujin's family was poor, with only barren land and calloused hands. Sujin had no choice but to borrow money to organize the funeral. The pitying and critical looks from the villagers followed her everywhere. Every day, she had to care for her child and manage the funeral arrangements, enduring whispers that she was the woman who brought misfortune to her husband. At the funeral, Sujin knelt before her husband's coffin, holding her child in her arms, tears rolling down her face. "Husband, the child is still so young. How could you leave us? What will become of me and the child if you are gone?" Sujin's heart-wrenching cries echoed in the space, making even the strongest people weep. But when the drums stopped and people left, Sujin was left with a bleak and painful future. Juno's death not only destroyed the family, but also left an insurmountable burden on Sujin. She became a widow, raising her child in the indifference and criticism of others. Sujin lived in poverty and despair, growing weaker every day. She struggled each day to care for herself and her child, with meals consisting only of a few sweet potatoes or potatoes. The newborn cried incessantly from hunger. Finally, in despair, Sujin made a decision that she would never forget for the rest of her life. One cold winter morning, Sujin, holding her child, crossed mountains and rivers to reach the wealthiest family in the village, Yunseong and Jie. They had tried to have children, but were unsuccessful. When Sujin arrived at their house with her child, they were surprised, but when they understood her purpose, their eyes filled with hope. Sujin knelt, holding her child tightly, and said in a choked voice, "Please raise my child. I can no longer care for him. He is still too young. I want him to have a better life. Please love and care for him." Yunseong and Jie looked at the child with mixed emotions, both regretful and joyful. Before leaving, Sujin took out a white handkerchief and handed it to them. On the handkerchief was embroidered a red diamond and an image of a small boy. Sujin choked as she said, "This is the only gift I can leave for my child. When he grows up and seeks his biological mother, please tell him this is a gift of love from his real mother." The story continues, and Minj, the child Sujin had entrusted to Yunseong's family, grew up in a wealthy and loving family. However, the secrets of his biological parents were never revealed. He grew strong and intelligent, becoming a young man admired by everyone. Yet Minj never knew the truth about his birth mother. "There's no turning back now. I'm a man, and I have to build my life on my own. This is a great opportunity to test myself. I truly believe I can succeed," Minjun said with strong determination. Seeing his unwavering resolve, Yunseong and his wife could no longer oppose him. They had to accept that Minjun was now an adult, and the time had come for him to face the world. However, Jae couldn't hold back her tears, thinking about the danger her beloved son might face. Minjun's first business items consisted of various tools, machine parts, nuts, bolts, nets, and repair tools, all of which were metal products. He had heard these items could fetch a good price at the Busan market. Although he lacked experience with large-scale transactions, Minjun decided to handle everything himself. He purchased the goods at the border, rented a truck, and transported them to Busan. Once there, he took charge of the transactions personally. When Minjun arrived at the Busan market, the unfamiliar sight overwhelmed him. The tightly packed shops, the bustling voices of merchants, and the sound of laughter created a world entirely different from the quiet countryside he was used to. He placed his goods in a corner of the market and began setting them up. As soon as he arrived, experienced merchants quickly took notice of his items. "Hey, young man, how much are these? I'll buy everything. Bring your stuff to our shop next time. We'll give you a good price," one of the shop owners said, eager to make a deal. Minjun was taken aback by their competitive responses. He hadn't expected his goods to be so well received. After negotiating several times, he sold nearly all of his items. However, with a few left to sell, Minjun decided to move to a quieter shop in a corner of the market. The shop was different from the others, calm and neatly organized. At the back of the shop stood a woman, who appeared to be around 38 or 40 years old. She had a slender figure and long black hair tied back. Minjun was drawn to her gaze. Her deep, affectionate eyes seemed to hold many untold stories. Her face was soft yet left a lasting impression, exuding a sophisticated yet warm atmosphere. Minjun hesitated for a moment before speaking. "Oh, Mom, I have some metal products. Would you be interested?" The woman looked at him for a moment, surprised. However, her voice was calm and confident as she replied, "Let me see how much you have." She carefully examined the items, occasionally nodding and picking them up to check their quality. "These are good, and the price is right. I'll buy them all," she said. Minjun couldn't hide his joy. "Thank you so much. It's my first time selling, and I'm really lucky that you're buying everything." The woman smiled gently, and her smile made her face even more radiant. "It's your first time, isn't it? I could tell right away. You're a young man with potential." Minjun scratched his head, feeling a little embarrassed. "Yes, I'm from a small village in Gangwon. It's my first time here, so everything is still unfamiliar. But I'm lucky to have met you." The woman paused for a moment, looking at Minjun before continuing. "You're honest and sincere. I believe you'll be successful in the future." But she lowered her voice slightly. "This market isn't easy. People can be tricky, so be careful. Don't let anyone take advantage of you." Her words warmed Minjun's heart. The genuine concern she showed him resonated deeply within him. Before he left, she gave him one last piece of advice. "If you have more goods, bring them here next time. My name is Nayoung. I'll handle your items personally." Minjun watched as Nayoung walked away, filled with strange emotions. Little did he know that this meeting would become a turning point in his life, and that Nayoung, with her kind yet sorrowful eyes, would be intertwined with his fate, leading to incredible stories ahead. Minjun and Nayoung's blossoming love. After their first transaction, Minjun prepared more goods and headed back to the Busan market. This time, he didn't hesitate and went straight to Nayoung's shop. "Hello, ma'am. I'm back. I have a lot of items this time," Minjun said, grinning widely. Nayoung looked up, her face lighting up when she saw him. The tall, handsome young man exuded a strong charm. Nayoung smiled softly and said, "You're back again. Let me see what you've brought this time." Minjun quickly began unpacking the items, and Nayoung examined each one carefully. She nodded in approval. "These are even better than the last ones. I'll buy everything." Minjun beamed with pride. "It's all thanks to you, ma'am. This time, I was more careful about what I selected, and having your support gave me a lot of confidence." Nayoung smiled and looked at Minjun with soft, affectionate eyes. "You're very capable and smart. If we work together, we'll do even better. I have the capital and experience, and you have youth and talent. Together, we'll definitely succeed." Minjun thought for a moment and then nodded. "I agree. Learning from you and working together would be a great opportunity for me." Nayoung, pleased, invited Minjun to her house to discuss their plans in more detail. Nayoung's past. Nayoung's house, located near the market, was clean and elegant. However, she lived alone. During their conversation, Nayoung began to open up about her past. "I'm from Kangwon, too, the same place as you. I've been living in Busan for over 10 years. I was married once, but I got divorced 4 years ago," she said. Minjun was taken aback. "Why? What happened?" Nayoung's expression turned somber as she continued. "My ex-husband relied heavily on alcohol and didn't have a stable job. And on top of that, I couldn't have children." Minjun listened with a heavy heart, feeling a deep sympathy for her. "I tried to endure for years, but eventually I had no choice but to give up," she said. Minjun silently listened, unable to imagine that someone as strong and successful as Nayoung had such painful memories. She sighed deeply and continued. "After the divorce, I was involved in a serious accident. I suffered severe facial injuries and had to undergo full reconstructive surgery. Fortunately, after my recovery, I was told I looked even better than before. But since then, I've lived alone. I just couldn't find the courage to think about remarrying." Minjun looked at her with sincere eyes. "You are truly strong, Nayoung. I not only think you're beautiful, but also incredibly capable. Someone like you will definitely find happiness," he said. Nayoung smiled faintly, though there was a hint of shyness in her eyes. "You're making me blush," she said softly. "I want to find someone who truly understands me, but I'm not sure it'll be easy." The blossoming relationship. From that day on, Minjun and Nayoung began working together more closely. As time passed, they got to know each other better and grew closer. Despite Minjun being a young man, his maturity and thoughtful care for Nayoung slowly began to affect her heart. On the other hand, Minjun found himself deeply respecting and admiring Nayoung's warmth and mature charm. One evening, after finishing work, Minjun suddenly spoke up. "Nayoung, I truly admire you. You're not just a business partner to me. You make me want to be a better person," he said. Nayoung looked at him, her eyes reflecting a mix of emotions. After a brief silence, she replied, "When I'm with you, I feel younger. But do you feel burdened by the age difference between us?" Minjun flashed a bright smile. "You're beautiful, Nayoung. Even an 18-year-old girl would feel inferior next to you. I don't care about age. What matters to me is your heart," he said. Nayoung's eyes welled up with tears. That night, they shared their feelings, deepening their bond. The passionate, youthful Minjun and the mature, wounded Nayoung's love bloomed like the flowers of spring, beautiful and romantic. A bold decision to marry. Over the next 4 months, their love grew even deeper. Despite the age gap, they shared an understanding of each other's souls and built a strong foundation of trust and love. One warm evening, after dinner at Nayoung's house, Minjun suddenly spoke up. "Nayoung, I think it's time for us to be together. Will you marry me?" he asked. Nayoung looked at him with a mix of joy and concern in her eyes. "Minjun, I love you too, but have you really thought this through? You're still young, and your future is bright." Minjun took her hand firmly and looked her in the eyes with determination. "Don't say that. I love you for who you are. I don't care about age. I want to build a life with you. Will you marry me? Tears filled Nayoung's eyes, and she nodded quietly. Yes, I'll marry you, seeking approval from their families. Minjun returned to his hometown to share the joyful news with his parents. However, he faced strong opposition that he hadn't expected. His mother, shocked, put her cup down on the table and said with concern, "What are you saying? A 20-year-old marrying someone much older? What will the villagers think?" Minjun remained calm and explained, "Mom, I love her. She's a good person, and she truly understands me." But his father was adamant in his refusal. "Minjun, you're still young. Think about your future. Marrying someone your mother's age. What will that say about our family?" Minjun took a deep breath and spoke resolutely. "I understand your worries, but I love her more than my life. We work well together, not just emotionally, but in business too. I believe in our future. Please understand and accept my decision." Minjun's mother wiped away tears as she said, "Minjun, I just want you to be happy. If you've made up your mind, I won't stop you. But I hope you won't regret it." After a long discussion, Minjun's parents finally gave their blessing. Overjoyed, Minjun returned to Busan to share the news with Nayeon. He hugged her tightly and said, "My parents gave their approval. Let's start preparing for the wedding. We'll have the ceremony here, and my parents will attend as representatives." Tears welled up in Nayeon's eyes as she looked at him. "Thank you, Minjun. You're amazing for going this far for us. I'm so happy." Minjun smiled warmly. "Your happiness is my happiness. We can overcome anything together." They began preparing for their wedding, filled with dreams for the future. Together, they would heal their past wounds and build a life full of genuine love. The wedding day, and a shocking revelation. On the day of the wedding, the ceremony was filled with joy and excitement. Minjun's family from Kangwon arrived, beaming with pride and happiness. Nayoung had meticulously planned everything, from the flower decorations to the tables where guests were seated. She hoped this day would be the perfect moment in her life. As the wedding progressed, the time came for a moment many had been eagerly waiting for: the exchange of gifts from Minjun's parents to the couple. Minjun's father, with a tearful voice, said, "Today, we want to give these two a small gift. It carries deep meaning. Inside this box, you'll find 2 wedding rings and a keepsake we've cherished for over 20 years." He opened a small wooden box and took out a white handkerchief, which had 4 red diamond patterns and a small boy's figure embroidered on it. The moment Nayoung saw the handkerchief, her body froze as if struck by lightning. Trembling, she stepped back, unable to speak. "Why is this handkerchief here?" she stammered. Minjun's adoptive father, surprised by Nayoung's reaction, asked, "Why are you so startled?" "This handkerchief was given to us by Minjun's birth mother when we adopted him 20 years ago." Nayoung, unable to tear her eyes away from the handkerchief, felt tears streaming down her face. "Who was his birth mother?" she asked in a choked voice. Minjun's adoptive mother, her voice trembling, answered, "We don't know where she is now. Her name was Sujin. After leaving the child with us, she disappeared without a trace." Nayoung screamed in shock, her world crashing down around her. Minjun, at that moment, the wedding hall fell silent to the point where even a breath could be heard. All eyes were on Nayoung. Minjun's adoptive parents exchanged shocked glances. His adoptive father, trembling, asked, "Are you the Sujin we entrusted our child to? Are you the one?" Nayoung nodded, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, I am Sujin. I had no choice but to entrust my son to you. And today, the person standing before me is my biological son." Nayoung collapsed to her knees, covering her face with her hands as she cried. She spoke to Minjun with a trembling voice. "Minjun, I am your real mother." Minjun froze, like he'd been struck by lightning. He looked at his adoptive mother, then back at Nayoung, his heart torn apart by the pain. "This doesn't make sense. We loved each other. We were going to get married. How can you be my real mother?" Nayoung couldn't bear to look into his eyes, and tears streamed down her face. Minjun's adoptive mother broke down in tears and sank into a chair. His adoptive father shook his head, speaking in a trembling voice. "This is a cruel twist of fate. How could God test us like this? The wedding hall, once filled with joy, now stood as a place of shock and sorrow. Minjun sat down, staring blankly into the air, his heart breaking with a cold, deep pain. He muttered softly to himself, "How can I accept this? How?" Nayoung approached Minjun and reached out her trembling hand to his shoulder. But Minjun suddenly stood up and backed away. "Don't touch me. Please don't." Minjun sat quietly, gripping the armrests of his chair. His eyes were empty, staring into nothingness. Finally, he spoke in a hoarse voice. "Why is fate so cruel? The woman I loved is my real mother? And I'm her son? How can I accept this terrible truth?" Nayoung knelt before him, tears flowing endlessly. "Minjun, please don't hate me. I never wanted this. For over 20 years, I've lived alone, never forgetting you, longing for you. Meeting you again, it's both happiness and heartbreak for me." Minjun's adoptive father sighed deeply, his eyes heavy with sorrow. He recalled the past, remembering how, 20 years ago, Nayoung had come to them, veiled and grief-stricken. They had no idea of her suffering at the time, just thankful to receive a child. Little did they know what cruel fate awaited them. Nayoung continued, "After leaving the village, I moved to Busan and tried to start over. I married, but I was never happy. I divorced after a few years and lived alone, only to later fall in love with a man who turned out to be my biological son." The room fell silent, filled only with stifled sobs and deep sorrow. Minjun buried his head in his hands, his heart shattered with pain. Minjun's adoptive mother hugged Nayoung, weeping. His adoptive father watched them silently, his eyes brimming with tears. That night, the house was filled with the sounds of sobbing. Everyone was broken by fate's cruelty and the despair that followed. 5 years later, the small house in Busan had changed completely. The grief and sorrow were gone, replaced by laughter and warmth. Nayoung, who had endured many storms in life, had finally found peace with her son Minjun. The guilt and loneliness of the past had faded. Minjun decided to stay in Busan to care for Nayoung and repay the love she had so selflessly given him. He deeply respected and admired the woman who had protected him through the hardest times. Minjun's life also blossomed anew. He found success in business and eventually true love. He married a kind and gentle woman from Gyeongsanamdo. Their wedding was modest but full of warmth, celebrated with the blessings of Minjun's adoptive parents and Nayoung. Everyone rejoiced as Minjun and his family overcame fate's challenges and found happiness. Nayoung often sat by the door of their small house, watching her grandchildren play. Their laughter soothed the pain of her past. Minjun and his wife took great care of her, ensuring she had no worries. This was her greatest blessing, a warm ending to a life she never thought possible. Minjun and Nayoung's story shows how powerful family love can be. This love has the strength to overcome pain, prejudice, and even the cruelest twists of fate. Life is full of unexpected challenges and harsh tests, but when we choose love and forgiveness, all wounds can heal. Cherish your family and love them, for they are always the most peaceful refuge we can return to. Let go of past pain, forgive, and learn to move forward. Only then can we find true happiness in the present and future. No matter what adversity comes our way, if we face it with strength, the storm will pass and brighter days will follow.